Hi, everybody. Welcome to our last, but I'm sure best, studio tour visit. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Joy Wiener. I'm Director of Education and Public Programs at the Heckscher Museum. And I've been doing that a long time. I think it's a labor of love at this point. And I'm very happy to welcome all of you. I think we're all women today. I think that's pretty cool. Everybody here today. And we will have a number of just little short housekeeping rules to go over, and then we will move right into our 3 studio visits.
Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Christina Schaff. I'm the Director of Visitor Experience at the Heckscher. Thank you so much everyone for joining us today. So just to give everyone a sense of what to expect today, if this is your first studio tour with us, we have 3 artists with us today, and each tour will last approximately 20 minutes or so. Okay, awesome. So we are going to begin today with a tour of artist Deborah Buck's studio in Sagaponack. And Joy, we're going to introduce Deborah.
I will.
Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. So Deborah's studio is in Sagaponack, as Christina just mentioned, on the first floor of her house. Deborah grew up on a farm in Baltimore. She spent a great deal of time alone reading, drawing, and painting. She was mentored at an early age by abstract expressionist Clifford Stein, who sent her to the Skowhegan School of Art at 18 years of age, something that changed her life forever and cemented her passion to live her life as an artist. She has worn many hats in her life, becoming a chef, running a gallery, wife, and mother, but always maintained her practice as an artist. She is currently working on paper with acrylic, pastel, and Japanese ink, which she began on a trip to China. The ink has transformed her work, and it continues to inform her practice. If she had to choose only 3 words to describe her artwork, they would be surreal, animated, and energized. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And welcome to my studio. I'm really happy to be able to share my workplace and my work with everyone here from the Heckscher. And anyway, so I'd like to sort of show you through my workspace, and as I do that, begin to talk kind of about my work itself. I've had a lot of studios in my life. I currently have a studio in New York City, and I have a studio here out east. I've had really big studios in lofts. I've had small studios, studios in basements, but I'm very happy in this studio in Sagaponack. It was a garage, at least half of it, and the other half was my studio for a year or so until I said, no, I gotta break down the walls, and I really need more space. So I don't need a garage. Car doesn't need a garage. Here I go. Anyway, so that's the nature of the space, but I like it because it's in my house. I can just go upstairs and I'm home. But also when I have studio visits, I'm isolated, and people can just come and see me as if this was just my studio. So anyway, that's it. I've been here for about 6 years in Sagaponack, and I go back and forth to the city for business, for appointments, and I keep a residence there as well. So I enjoy having 2 spaces to work in, and I think I work differently in each place. So having said that, okay, let's take a look around, and I'm going to, there we go. Okay, great. So
Slow,
this
slow,
is,
slow.
did you get dizzy?
Yeah.
So this is where you are. This is sort of an overview of the space. And then we're going to get into looking at specific stuff. This is my workstation. I've always had sort of a central area, a big table with my paints and brushes and palette. In this case, my flat files are underneath of it. I think you can see I'm kind of a messy painter. The mess is sort of part of my process, I think. I always love to look at my palette, and I'm always looking for sort of worlds within worlds. And frequently I look down at my palette and I'm like, wow, that's really great. How do I take that and put it into my painting? Or how does that inform my painting? So I use chalk and pastels. So, I'm a big believer in high-low. These are really good artist pastels, and this is children's chalk. When it comes to the paint that I use, I'm also not much of a snob. I like golden paints, but I've also been known to use, kindergarten tempera. The ink, though, I'm very fussy about. And this is a bottle of Sumi ink, which I use along with the acrylic as its base. So I think anywhere where you see a lot of the black line, that's all ink. So I don't use black paint. I just use the ink. And the ink has a very different viscosity than the paint does. It has a heavier viscosity that I really like. But it stays very, very fluid.
Does it sit on top of the paint?
Yes, frequently.
So your background is first going in with color and then coming in with the ink?
Right. So that's why this is the start of a new painting, which I just started last night. And I thought that I would like to show this because it kind of explains my process. I like to say that I'm a treasure hunter. I love to hunt for treasure. I love antiques. I like looking for things in, again, high and low. I read the National Enquirer and the New York Times in the same sitting. So I'm always looking for things that I can appropriate, that can inform, that make me laugh, or that show an absurdity. So anyway, I begin each painting. This is large, 45 by 51 inches, and it's on heavy 300-pound arches paper, which is push pinned into homosote walls. But I begin with washes of color. And I try to work very, very intuitively when I begin each painting. And just think about, what color do I want to see? What colors, what kind of washes of color do I want to work with? So I just begin laying in the paint, and then I use a battery operated spray bottle, my little friend, because I was losing my thumbs using a manual one. Anyway, and begin to really wet the paint on the paper. And I love just how serendipitous the process can be by letting the water kind of begin to make these rivulets and washes. And so then once I've got sort of an abstract color base on the paper, I begin to use the ink and the chalk to look for forms. And you can see that I've started here. And then, I just I go into the image and begin to pull and push the forms forward and backwards. And then sometimes I get a very pleasing formal composition, but I don't know what it is. So I have to keep pushing that until it makes itself clear, until I begin to find recognizable forms, so that I can see, what is it I'm trying to talk about? What sort of characters or landscape who's in there. So again, the treasure hunt, and I can begin to see some eyes and faces in here. I don't know if anyone else sees those, but I see them. So I probably will start there, kind of looking for new friends within this abstraction. Feel free to stop me at any time and ask me questions about, hey, Deborah, what do you mean by that? If it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense to me. So this one's called Lookout. This is a new one. It's smaller. Sometimes the paintings are very, very labored, and sometimes they're really not. And this one feels fresh to me. It's sort of, it resolved itself very, very fast. I love totems, and I love the notion of totem poles, and just, how they would make up these protective creatures and faces and spirits. So totems and totem poles creep into my work. The idea of guardians, like I love the Chinese foo dogs, which are protectors. This is a new painting. This is called Goldie and the Bears. So yeah, this is who emerged out of the paint and the ink and the drawing. And they go through many, many iterations, and sometimes there are lots of different characters before they really resolve as one particular set of creatures. I've started working again. I worked for years and years. Canvas, oil on canvas. I've started using canvas again on panel, just to challenge myself. And so this is called The Keepers of the Gate. It feels very different using the acrylic on canvas. I was used to oil on canvas, and I'm getting used to it, but I'm letting myself make some bad paintings. I don't think this is a bad painting, but it's not resolved. And I'm not yet getting the density and the intricacy and the depth that I get on paper, but I'm hoping to get there.
Will you go back into this piece?
Well, I think so. She's bugging me. So, but I'm not sure yet. There are times that there's a painting that, I've finished, but they sort of niggle at me. They just, bug me. And they say, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. You're not done yet. And this one is doing that, but I just mix up a batch of paint and just go, like a mad woman into them. But this one's not ready to have that happen yet. I think it still has things to teach me. So I'm still looking at it and, trying to get used to a new medium.
Deborah, I think Carol has her hand raised. Carol, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yep, sure.
Hi. So happy to have the opportunity to visit your studio.
Thank you.
We share some geographic things in common. Studio for me in New York City, and also little hamlet of East Moriches. Further west.
Right.
I grew up in East Hampton, and
okay.
I admire your early years of having the opportunity to go to Skowhegan. And
it was a thrill, yeah.
And I'm thinking about the things that might inspire you and influence you. I see some appreciation of Philip Guston. Am I seeing that properly?
Oh, absolutely. No, I think he's a master, just an absolute master. And, I really, I come from that. They were my earliest heroes, and my heroes are painters, heavy hitting painters and fearless painters who were unafraid. and painters who sometimes weren't really accepted during their time. But yeah, so I feel like I was born and bred in the abstract expressionists, and then found my own language, my own way after that. But that's really kind of what my foundation is.
And I'm thinking about your color palette, and this might be really off the mark, but I'm seeing like Ensure.
Oh, another hero. Another
Really?
hero.
Oh,
Right.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. Another hero who was out of his mind. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I say that that I make these characters and these things in these surreal landscapes because they make the real world more interesting to me, and that I can imagine them, so I make them. But I wish that they actually existed. Like, I wish I could go outside and see some of these figures that I create and these characters. And I think that Ensor was the same. I think that, he saw people as masks and animals, and I think he had an extraordinary imagination and a capacity to paint, hands that, and an eye. I mean, he was just really so facile and brilliant, just super smart.
Well, thank you so much for answering my questions and letting us visit your studio. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, now we're going to take a look at some paintings. Okay, this one is called Mass Transit. So it's a big fat school bus. I was very aware before COVID hit, and actually I did this during COVID, of just how crowded our world has become. And this was a way of kind of pondering that. This is called Enchanted Forest. And again, these are, I think of these characters as friends. I would really like to be able to walk outside and see them in my backyard. I think you can see this, again, this kind of totem effect. And it's a format that I really like. It makes sense to me because there are multiple figures in one figure. This is a piece from probably about 2 or 3 years ago. It's called Candyland. Beginning of some more figurative work. My work fades back and forth between abstraction and figuration. And I think you can see that between backgrounds and foregrounds. This painting is called Walk Like an Egyptian. It was just before I went to Egypt, like 1.5 years ago. And that trip really did a lot for my head. I came back and did this painting, which is actually an enormous painting. It's just a postcard of it. But the notion of hieroglyphics, and I've always painted kind of flat. I'm not sure my depth perception is that great. So just this idea of having figures sort of up front. That's way too glary. Okay, so this is called Sitting Ducks. And I think I got the light out of that one. This was done about 1 year ago after another shooting. And so it's a way of making something unpalatable that I wanted to speak about palatable. This is called Taking It on the Road. And I think these snails are having a good time. So, the idea of theater and like the carnival and the circus play into my work. I was always fascinated by that world, because it was sort of, the reality of it was very harsh. And yet it was a surreal world. And it was about creating a lack of reality for viewers. So I'm always kind of playing with those sorts of ambiguities. This is called Rabbit Chat. There's a big stripe of sunlight on it from the window. I like the studio because it just has small little square windows, so they don't usually create too much of a problem for me. Anyway, so again, the idea of talking animals, animals as anthropomorphic figures.
What do you think they would be saying to each other?
Oh, I think they're hatching a plan. I think they're hatching a plan, and I think it's a pretty serious plan. I think they have a lot of respect for one another.
Mm-hmm. But they like to get in trouble.
Yeah, most of my characters like to make trouble. And the idea of like the big rabbit watching over them, but I think they're hatching a plan. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, that's the thing, is I really like to leave the narrative to the viewer. I kind of propose a situation and the characters, and then, I let the viewer decide what tale they want it to be about. Whether they want to engage with the image and make their own narrative. Anyway, because that's kind of like what I like to look at. I like things to be suggestive and open-ended at the same time. This one's called They Had Stars in Their Eyes. Again, this notion of freak show, circus. I loved the ice capades. I'm so sad they don't have ice capades anymore. Anyway, this is again a very large painting. So, I suggest who the characters are, and I suggest where they are, someplace kind of sparkly. And I abandon the notion of making them look like something that is real, but it's real enough. And then I leave the rest to the viewer to finish that story.
Great.
So I think that brings us back to where we were. There.
Great.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Carol, did you have another question, or is your hand just raised from before? I just want to make sure.
Uh-oh. I mean, I always have another question.
Okay.
But I don't want to monopolize the time with my questions. So I do have another question, but would you like to check and see if other people have something they'd like to know first?
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anyone else have anything else that they would like to ask Deborah?
I have a question also, but I'll wait.
Everyone's
We'll take Carol's question first.
Okay, Carol, go ahead then. Okay.
So, Deborah, I'm seeing that you have a true appreciation for fantasy and almost a kind of spectacle.
Yeah.
So I also spent time in Cairo, mm-hmm. And I was wondering if there was something that you carried away with you about sort of like the presentation of the body, the presentation of even just seeing the Sphinx. There's like this amazing sense that the everyday becomes monumental.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about that. Almost a feeling of drama.
Absolutely. Everything you say makes sense to me. It's interesting because even in my 20s, I began studying Egyptology and the history of Egyptian art. I became fascinated by their funeral rites. And I thought that, you know, the whole notion of preparing for your funeral while you were alive, I thought that in some way was really kind of healthy. So, you know, I knew a lot about Egypt when I went, and it was a really kind of a mind-blowing trip. It was just incredible. And I went just during this little window when things were really calm, and then they kind of blew up again. But so I kind of feel like Mrs. Magoo goes to Egypt. But the Sphinx was very, very powerful. I had made paintings since my 20s about the Sphinx. And to stand there, you know, in front of, you know, and damn, if the biggest thing was that, you know, that I had always pictured the Sphinx as a woman. I mean, I looked at a million pictures of the Sphinx. And for me, denial, it's amazing it works, right? But she was a woman. She had a chest, she had boobs. And I got there, I went, damn it, the Sphinx is a man. How did I miss that? I'm a smart girl. But anyway, but I felt something very, very strong and powerful, that, you know, all of that was still there from centuries and centuries ago. And I found an incredible sense of peace, that I was part of that continuum from thousands and thousands of years, and that it would all go on after me as it went on before me. And somehow it would all be okay, and that the Sphinx would remain. But just, you know, for me, it was a very, very special moment. It was swell. It was great. It was a very life affirming for me. And the Sphinx much more. I mean, you know, a lot of it was very, very moving and powerful, but the Sphinx really blew me out of the water. So,
Well,
and as far as the spectacle goes, you know, I kind of loved how the hieroglyphics are kind of like, ta-da, ta-da, you know, everything was the mask, the hat, the presentation, in order to tell a story, in order to teach. And so I don't know. I mean, I've always loved the theater. I've always liked things that were kind of extreme, or an exaggeration. So, yeah, I think that's why I kind of, I always feel like some of these figures are kind of going, ta-da, like, take it or leave it, here it is. So yeah, that's knit deeply into my psyche.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great. So my question was about whether you have vivid dreams
Oh yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
And do you find them working their way into your paintings?
You know, they must. I dream in Technicolor. And I say that to people, and they go, "Really? You have color in your dreams?" And I go, "Yeah, doesn't everybody?" So I don't know. That's just what my reality is. I mean, that's how my head works. They're very, very vivid. I'm actually pretty good. You know, in the morning, I try when I wake up. If I don't have to run, I try and actually decipher what I've dreamt and remember. You know, it frequently doesn't last till lunch, but I think that your dreams are really your life. You know, they're not separate from your life. I think they're part of your head, and the more you understand about your own head, the better you are as an artist. So I think, again, that's all knit into my psyche.
Great, thank you. Anybody else?
I think we have time for one more question, if anyone else has anything. No?
I had one.
Oh, sure.
I just unmuted myself so I could ask. So I'm really interested in this phenomenon that happens in your studio, Deborah, where you begin with this sort of abstract underpainting and then look for. So when we talked about that last week, I knew there's got to be a word for that, that tendency to find faces in objects or patterns where patterns don't really exist. To put those together into a face. There's a word for it. I looked it up. I just Googled
What is it?
it's called pareidolia.
Ooh,
Pareidolia.
ooh,
And
that's a good one.
so wanted to ask you about the metamorphosis that takes place in your work and whether that's, I know you must be very well versed or very interested in Egyptian mythology, but in ancient Greek mythology and Ovid's Metamorphosis, there are so many wonderful stories about, women turning into trees or one thing turning into another. Do you,
Right.
does that come into play? Do you
Oh,
think
yeah.
about, okay, because you're,
So, I mean, basically, almost all this work is about metamorphosis. My favorite book is Alice in Wonderland, which is basically about metamorphosis. Alice gets big, she gets little. The Cheshire Cat disappears, he comes back, he's just a smile. So yeah, I mean, and I call the paintings sometimes fractured fairy tales because I think of, these images and these creatures and what I'm talking about to be like the passages of a life and how everything changes, that it just keeps changing. The one thing you can be sure of is that everything will keep changing. And so, and fairy tales are about metamorphosis and things changing and turning into dragons or, fairies or pumpkins into carriages, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, it's all about metamorphosis, but not just in sort of a childlike or myths and legends, which I read an awful lot of. But I think, in an adult notion of metamorphosis and how important it is to think about it, and as an artist, where was I, where am I, and where am I going? And where was my work, where is my work, and where is my work going? I don't know where it's ever going, but I'm aware of its trajectory.
great. Thank you. Great answer.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Deborah. This was fascinating.
Thank you.
Loved it.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to my studio. I'm Barbara Stein, and I think of myself as a representational painter, basically. So I'm going to show you around, starting in my basement, which is adjacent to my studio, some of my work, and I'm going to talk about a progression from what you can see in front of you now, hopefully, of work that is done in a fairly traditional landscape format. Some of these are plein air pieces, which means that they're done outside for the most part. This one was in Port Washington on the water. Very pretty here in parts. And
Barbara, can I just interject for one moment? We didn't do our formal introduction of your background, so
okay, so
just
let's back up.
okay.
Okay.
So Barbara holds a BFA in art education from Carnegie Mellon and an MA in art education from NYU. Additionally, she studied with a number of instructors at the Art Students League and continues to learn in the representational tradition in workshops and classes. She has a regular painting practice and teaches drawing and painting to children and adults. If she could choose only 3 words to describe her work, they would be color, light, and feeling. Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so just, right back to where I was before. These paintings are small because when I'm working plein air or outdoors, it is easier to handle small pieces. So that's what I've done here. This is done in a beautiful place called Sands Point, at a preserve in Sands Point, where the land and the trees are absolutely beautiful almost at any time of year. And so I've painted there a few times, not too often, but a few times. Some of these pieces I started in plein air, and then I brought back to my studio to continue on. This was done in Vermont because I've lived up in Vermont, and I pretty much fell in love with painting all over again when I lived in Vermont. The simplicity of form, the clarity of the light, the colors, the beautiful earthy colors really attracted me. This is a pastel. I like to work in pastel as well as working in oil. And here I'm in a traditional landscape mode, really, but the rocks were so interesting. And I just couldn't believe the flatness and the beauty of these rocks. It was Nova Scotia, actually. A very,
Is that oil pastel or chalk pastel?
this one is chalk pastel. I've always thought oil pastel would be interesting, but I haven't really gotten into it yet. I work with kids sometimes, and they often like the oil pastels, but I myself haven't really explored them that much. This is chalk pastel. I love the colors in pastel. And so really this group of paintings, this one is also a pastel. I like the very simple forms of it. I hope you can see without too much of a glare because it has glass on it. Okay, and these, was there something someone wanted to say?
Oh, no, I was just saying that the glare, I mean, there's glare, but it's not too bad, so don't
Not
worry.
in the way? Good. Okay. Yeah, so these pieces, and this one is really a pure, for the joy of it, oil painting outside, kind of untouched by going back into it in the studio and perfecting it, just letting it be what it was when I was out there, which was really wonderful. I love to be out there, and the light and the spontaneity is a great source of joy to me. Okay, so I want to move over to another part here where I can show you some other pieces. Okay. I need to make a little change here, so hold on for 1 second, please. I have to pin myself. Okay. All right, here you can see that I'm showing a piece that incorporates figures because I am interested in bringing figures into my paintings. So here I have two fishermen at the town dock in Port Washington. And I liked what Deborah said about high-low. Like here, the gorgeous landscape, the gorgeous sunset. And the guys one is on his cell phone and they're fishing. And it just seemed like a sort of a great combination of people doing what we do or what they do, but in a landscape that's so extraordinary. So that's what really kind of got to me about this particular scene. Again, it brought figures in, and that was important to me. Here on the wall, and I see that there's a big shine, so let me move the laptop over a little, is a painting that I'll take off the wall so you could see it a little better. It's a portrait of a young man who is a cousin, but I loved that he was playing the guitar. I loved the flow of the pose and the guitar and the tilt of his head and how he's kind of leaning in a very relaxed way. He's a wonderful musician, and I felt that a lot of that came through in the photograph. Over here, I wanted to share a piece that, see if I can get a better view of it for you. There it is. This is a diptych, and it was something I really loved working on because the sky is so vast and the land and the expanse of the land. I was really wanting to capture that in a long format like this. And as I start to work larger, which I am doing, I feel that I could work even larger than this. This is about 18 by 30, 20 by 40, actually, with the two together. It's from Ireland, from a trip that I took to Ireland, and I was struck by the beauty of the land there, the kind of unspoiled, very lush greens and the rocks and the oldness of the place. And the old, I don't know if it's a castle or an old house of some kind, probably not occupied anymore, but I really thought it was made for a beautiful scene. And I work from photographs that I take myself. I don't borrow photographs from the internet or anything like that. These are, things that I've seen and that I've taken myself.
Barbara, do you think that you'll continue working in diptych or triptych?
I really like the format, and I think I probably will. I could even imagine adding on, again. And I like that because really you can actually separate the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, they happen to work anyway, in my opinion. So I like that about a diptych or a triptych idea. And I have a few others that I'm showing in a progression. So here I see, you can see that I'm really getting more interested in the sky as compared to what I showed before when the pieces were more traditional landscape. And here I'm starting to gain more interest in clouds and sky, although the landscape is still there. Okay, here I'm going to show you a couple of pieces that are also in the same progression, where again, this was a photograph that I took in Ireland. And that one was Port Washington over here, the sky. But here, more and more, the clouds and the skies are becoming more important to me. Although I really love these gorgeous trees, these ancient, almost ancient, certainly old trees. So I really worked them into my painting and worked them over and over and over again. The sky really just came, but I added layers to kind of get a richness of paint. Okay, so I do work in layers. Okay, the other painting, the one next to it here, you can see a little bit better now, hopefully. This painting was really very ethereal to me, which is a way that I go. I think of myself as somewhat ethereal in my painting and my view of life. And here, the forms of the clouds, the way the light is hitting it, the opening in the dark clouds to allow for the beautiful negative space of the sky there was really attracted me. And here I have a very soft palette, like I'm working in very soft colors. I like to do that from time to time. Down here at the bottom of the painting, I show the tops of the trees, which is kind of important to me because I want the painting, and sometimes it's important that the painting will remain grounded. And that's what showing the trees and the land kind of does for me in these paintings. Was there a question about this? Okay. I wanted to move back for a moment to speak about my interest in figurative painting. And hopefully you will be able to see pretty well a painting here that I'll bring up closer, but I hope it isn't too dark. Okay, so this is a painting of a tofu seller in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. And there was something about her and the way the hands were reaching down to her and her selling the tofu that she made that really grabbed me. Interesting composition. I worked very hard on this painting for probably over a year. I kept coming back to it, thinking, am I done? Do I have the expression on her face that I would really like to have? You know, she's a Muslim, so the head covering that she's wearing is important. It's a marketplace, and it's just a painting that is meaningful to me. And believe it or not, I'm not quite sure that I'm finished with it yet.
Barbara, it looks like we have a question from Carol about one of the landscape pieces.
Okay, sure. Hi, Carol.
Hi, it was actually from me. Oh, unless Carol also
Oh, I'm
asked.
sorry.
Oh, okay.
Liz?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Liz.
Hi, Barbara. Well, you know, I mean, of course, it's a thrill to see all of your work that I haven't seen in a while since I've seen you last.
Thank you.
It really is. And to see how how you've progressed and all the things you're doing.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to say one thing though, the so-called unfinished landscape that that you just allowed yourself to be spontaneous and kind of put
Oh, yes.
put the paint down, but you kind of left it. I respond so much to that. I mean, the others I love also, but
Thank
this
you.
for me was really somehow so intriguing, and it was a very powerful piece that
Let's see if I can find it again for you.
it's very green and sort of great big hill. There it is. Okay, right. Yeah. Um, I it just works for me. It's simple, and I mean there's a lot, it's kind of there's almost a kind of a juxtaposition of light that's over the actual landscape. It's almost, I mean, what I see is almost, it's like if you're looking at a negative, like a double exposure almost.
Hmm.
I get that feeling about it that it's moving a little bit, kind of like there's like actually the forms that are moving.
You know, it's so interesting. It's such a phenomena of painting outside that I find, Liz. Thank you for this comment, because I get a feeling of movement when I leave the paintings alone.
Yeah.
I get a big feeling of movement.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful to allow it. And of course, I know it's very hard to allow it because you always want to come back and,
And it's just that last touch, or that last little thing.
But actually, you know what? I think that this speaks so strongly.
Well, thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate that. And it's interesting that you picked up on it, because I feel that way myself. It's certainly one of the directions I hope to continue going in with my work. So, I did want to just show, if I may, another portrait, because figurative is something that I do like. It's hanging up on the wall. I see that there's a spotlight shining on it, so let me take it down from here if I can. Okay. So this is a painting from a photograph I took in Beijing of three, not older, but traditional gentlemen musicians, playing their traditional instruments in Beijing. And this was in the Temple of Heavenly Peace, which is like part of a big complex that I'm forgetting the name of now in Beijing. But there they were on a porch. People were watching them. It was a beautiful, soft landscape behind them. And I just found this so touching because, this is music and people from another era and another time period in China, I should say. It wasn't another era. They're still alive probably, but they're playing and they're really into their music. So I wanted to show that because I do like to do figurative work as well. So I wanted to show this one.
It's not what you would expect, like if you're going to do something from China, you wouldn't expect it to be this, but it makes it really universal. I mean, you could imagine them, I don't know, anywhere, three men with their instruments on a porch. I mean, with a beautiful landscape in the background. Somehow, I think that's great.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed doing their faces and their instruments and the whole setting. So at this point, I want to go into my studio. And here you can get a view of my studio, hopefully, the shelving, and as I will give you a kind of a view of a lot of light and a lot of windows that I have here. I have a flat file that I use to store my work. I have shelving where I store pastels, tape, all kinds of little things that I need. I do some of my own framing, so I have materials for that as well. Okay. Okay. So what I'd like to do at this point is show you around my space. It's a small space, and you did get a view of it just now. It's about 12 by 14. So I have to maximize my space. It would be wonderful if I had more space, but I think one way in which this space informs my work is that my work is still somewhat on the small side, not really, really small. I do work as large as 20 by 40, as in the diptychs that I showed. And what I have on the easel now is about maybe 20 by 24. And I can work much larger than that on the easel, and I do. But I think if I had more space, I'd probably work 2 or 3 times as large as I'm working now. I had a southern exposure in the studio here. So today, on a day that is, not as bright as it was a little while ago, you can see that I really have a lot of windows here. And I do have shades that are solar shades, which help me to control the light. However, that light does make it challenging for me to work for any length of time on a still life, which I do like to do in the studio from life here. So I can work for up to 2 to 3 hours without the light beginning to change because of the southern exposure. I also have natural light fluorescents here that give me good light when it's an overcast day. And I also use from time to time little lights like this, which I can focus on creating dramatic lighting effects on a still life, for example. And I would show you this piece, which was done with that little spotlight. And you can see that the leaves here in the painting cast shadows on the back wall and down on the fabric, and can create quite a dramatic effect, which is something I like to play with and would like to do more of. I like the drama of that. So as I said, the studio is about 12 by 14. Here I would like to show you my work table. And this table was made for me when I lived in Vermont by a friend. It's one of the oldest pieces of furniture I have in my studio. And it is a reminder that while I mostly work with oils and pastels, I have done printmaking and I've done abstraction, and I've even illustrated a children's book in this space. When I lived in Vermont, I wanted to add, I did batik and pottery. So I don't know if I already mentioned that, but I loved batik and I really, really loved doing pottery as well. But at a certain point, I felt as an artist, I had to make a decision about what am I going to want to put my energies into. And I moved to toward painting and pastel, two-dimensional work. So,
Barbara, I did want to ask you about the children's book you illustrated and how that has, impacted your work outside of that project or vice versa.
it's a very good question, and I'm really glad you asked it. The children's book gave me a kind of discipline. I am disciplined. I think many of us who do art are disciplined, but I had never really sat down every day to research a little figure for the children's book, to research the size of animals, because there were animals in this story, relative to a five-year-old, let's say, and really trying to kind of get this together. So it wasn't a complete fantasy, but it had some basis in reality. And I did it in watercolor, which is not my main medium. Really enjoyed doing it. I didn't show you the book only because it isn't really my main focus, but I'm happy to show it if you want me to. I could get it maybe a little bit later on and show you some of the interior illustrations. But that is the way, it was a different kind of discipline. It was almost like going to an office, which is my studio, this table that I just showed, and just sitting there doing research for the figures, as I told you. And it was about 20 to 23 different illustrations, about 8 by 8, about that size. So it was really, it was a wonderful thing to do. And I would like to do more of it actually. But
did you know the writer?
yes, the writer contacted me actually through a friend, a mutual friend, and the book is published. It's for young children, and I did know him, and we developed more of a relationship as time went on, and I received his story, and I worked back and forth with him, checking on the illustrations, and it was quite a process.
Can I ask what the name of the book is so we can all look it up?
Okay, it's called Come Play With Me by the Sea. Okay, so actually the book is published, but we could, I'm happy to talk with you more about it if you're interested. That was my first foray into the world of children's book publishing. Let's see, what else did I want to mention to you about the process that I have? On a typical day in my studio, I will set up my palette, and my palette is not a particularly beautiful palette. This is a palette that I've used since the days of the Art Students League. The thing I like about it and why I continue to use it is it's on a piece of glass, very easy to clean and easy to cover. And if I put little drops of clove oil in here, it keeps my paint dry for a long time, and I can keep replenishing it. There's not too much paint on the palette right now. I put the clove oil on these little dots. I don't know if you could see them. They're furniture pads that I'm sticking on here that are absorbent, like with felt. So I could put the clove oil, which seems to keep the paint moist for a longer period of time.
So Barbara, we are getting a little short on time, so maybe if you just have any final comments.
Okay, I'll be glad to. I had a few. I wanted to do a comparison of paintings, and I think I would do that and end with that. Okay? All right. So I wanted to compare very quickly two paintings for you. Let me hold this one up close first, so you'll be able to see it hopefully better. Are you getting a view of it?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if the color is coming up, but anyway, this is as close to abstraction as I've gotten in recent times. It's pink clouds that I saw here in Port Washington in a sunset. I want to compare this with another painting that I took the pictures for both paintings on the same night at the same sunset. So again, let me try to get the color up here. I'm not sure that I am. Better?
Yes.
Okay, so this is also Port Washington at the town dock where the two fishermen were sitting. And I loved doing the boats, the play of light on the water. And the clouds were very challenging. I don't know how much of the details you can see on them in the upper area of the clouds, but it was hard for me to believe that color like this was actually really existing, at the sunset in Port Washington here. So, sometimes to me, the magic of reality is as magical as anything else, I have to say. That's very often why I stay with realistic painting, because I find a tremendous amount of magic in the real world. And I strive to show that. Does anyone have any questions for me? I'm happy to answer them.
I wanted to say something. I don't know how to raise my hand, so
Okay.
let me do my
Don't worry,
video.
you're good. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm totally just an art lover, not a artist of any kind, but I really like your focus on the sky, and I always find myself drawn to looking at the sky. And I don't know if you saw last night, the sunset was
I missed it. I saw it, but I couldn't get out to photograph it. I was really upset.
Oh my God. And I kept taking pictures with my phone, and I just felt like I never really could get it, how it beautifully looked. But when I look at your work, it seems like you really can bring out how that sky looks and the different variations, and also, how it reflects on the water is
Thank you so
just
much.
so
Thank you.
beautiful. And, I really am getting a lot out of, your work. It's very beautiful. It's not really a question. I just wanted to
I
share
really
that with you
appreciate
and
that.
tell you that
Thank you.
and also another thing I've noticed is that I don't know what inspired you to start putting figures in your landscape and in your work, but I have looked at many pieces of work that have a lot of landscape, and then I look at them and I say, but something's missing. There's no people here,
That's,
and
that's
so it's really I'm inspired that you're putting people. So
I felt that way, and especially since I've lived in Vermont, and Vermont is so rural, and it's so beautiful. So I was so enamored of all of that for a very long time, and then coming to Port, which is a suburban community, but also still quite pretty here, and the skies are blowing me away. These sunsets. But yes, the fishermen at the town dock, or the men playing these old instruments in China, harking back to another time in their lives about which I know almost nothing, but still I got a feeling like something was evoked for me. in seeing them do this. So I very much agree with you and felt the need, or not so much a need as it would be an expansion for me to add figures into the
It
landscape.
kind of brings it to life, you know, with the
Thank you.
people. To me, it does. Like,
I
yeah,
agree. I agree 100%. I really do.
good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. That was just really wonderful. And I can
Thank
see
you,
what-
Joy.
Okay, so we are zipping from one end of the island to the other because we were in Sagaponack, back west to Port Washington, and now we are back east again to Claire and her studio in Watermill. And Claire's studio is in the basement of her home in Watermill, where she has lived and worked since 1996. Claire earned a BFA in painting from the University of Texas at Austin in 1980 and an MFA in sculpture at Tyler School of Art in both Rome and Philadelphia. She received a fellowship in sculpture from New York Foundation for the Arts in 2007, a Paula Krasner Foundation grant in 1990. Her current studio project had its beginnings in a studio residency at Mass MoCA in 2018, and she has continued to develop thanks to a residency fellowship at the Saltonstall Foundation for the Arts in 2019 and a recently completed artist residency at the Watermill Center in October and November of this year. If she had to describe her work in 3 words, they would be tactile, physical, and visual. Please welcome Claire Watson.
Hi, thanks everyone for coming on such a beautiful day. It's so funny, I didn't remember the 3 words I used.
Are they still good?
I think they're still good. They're pretty broad, but I'm going to start just by giving you sort of a 360 view of the space that we're in. And then I'm going to show some images that will sort of walk you through my current process, and then talk about process and development in a slightly different way. But what you're seeing here is the work table where I was just sitting, and oh, can you see it? Yeah. And a few pieces that are hanging in this section of the room. This is the larger space, and it's quite cleaned up at the moment because I for this studio visit, and I had a studio visit this morning, masked, but I'll just give you sort of a view of what's going on in here right now. Okay, and actually, talk to you a little bit about my process. And the way I'm going to do that is by sharing my screen so that I can show some photographs, some steps in my process. And so this is the studio as it looks when I'm working, when I'm thinking and working out the initial stages of a piece or pieces. And I do work on more than one thing at a time. So I've always worked with found objects, and the series that I've been working on for the last couple of years uses the pattern shapes of disassembled leather garments, pants and coats. I preserve those as found shapes and found colors and sort of reconfigure them into abstract compositions. The leather is pieced together. It's pieced to itself or to sections of canvas by hand, and then inset into a larger section of canvas with the sewing machine. But what you're seeing here on the floor are the pattern parts of the various things that I've taken apart with the seam ripper, and I lay them out on the floor and move them around in different ways as I'm figuring out what I want to do with them. On the wall, you see finished works from 2019 and two of the pieces that are in the Long Island Biennial. As part of my process, I work to create studies for the pieces, the larger pieces, on paper using collage and gouache. And I cut out of paper the actual pattern shapes that I have to work with, and then rearrange them and just think about it's a way of moving through ideas really quickly, moving through variations. But this is an example of one step in the process in which I have pieced the pattern parts of a pair of black leather pants and a red leather coat. Those are hand sewn to canvas, and I've laid that section onto a larger piece of canvas and then cut that shape out and insert. I pin and then stitch by machine the center section to the surrounding canvas. This is just a, I then stretch it. Currently, I'm using stretcher bars rather than shaped panels. And I've been applying gesso to the rear of the canvas because I like the kind of shadow or halo effect it creates when the gesso is pushed through the weave and it just appears faintly on the front. And in a minute, I'll show you again that finished piece that's hanging on the wall. But I also wanted to talk because people always wonder why I'm working with leather and how I got to this point. And I loved what Deborah said earlier about metamorphosis and development as an artist, and how, there was the before, and there's what we're working on now, and then there's where we're going, which we don't always see. But one thing leads to another. And I mentioned that I'd always worked with found objects. This is a much earlier series in which I was, and this is what this is a screenshot of a page of my website. A series of works that had to do with tobacco pipes and ideas about functional form. And really the first one is the center one in the top row was an homage to Magritte and the painting Madame Recamier's coffin. But the entire series is really about the entire series is titled Ceci n'est pas, for his painting, which was titled La Trahison des Images, in which there's a painting of a tobacco pipe and the words, "This is not a pipe." But
excuse me, are these painted, each one?
no, these are
Actual
these
things.
are objects. Tobacco. I took apart the tobacco pipes and then
The little volume thing
so, and they are wall mount.
going on.
They mount on the wall. This was a counterpoint. This was a series in which I started because I was just wondering what would be a counterpoint to the tobacco pipe in terms of an intimate object that's an extension of the body, but that's like a feminine corollary to the tobacco pipe. And so I worked for a long time with kid leather gloves. And as you see on the screen, I made one sculpture for every pair or single glove. And there were a bunch of them. This is just a screenshot of that page of the website. So there are many more. And then in 2012, this is a series that I called Conundrums. And I began combining the tobacco pipes and the gloves in various configurations. Eventually, I had a huge number of gloves, and I started being interested in working on a much larger scale. The earlier small sculptures were quite intimate, and I wanted to find a way to combine all of these individual gloves in aggregate. And that's why I began opening them up and flattening them out. And this piece that I'm pointing to with the cursor is fairly large. I showed it to you on the wall when we first began, but it's made of 10 pairs of white leather gloves and 10 pairs of black leather gloves that are sewn together and then mounted on muslin. Um, and the others are sort of variations on that idea. Um, and I just began to be curious about what would happen if I approached, if I referenced the entire body rather than the glove. What would happen if I opened up these garments on a much larger scale using coats and pants and so forth? And that's really what led to the work that I'm working on today. I skipped. There was an in between in which so this is again a screenshot from my website of all of work that's been, and there's more, but all of these pieces have been done in 2020. But that's how I arrived here. And I'll stop sharing the screen so that I forgot to include an image of work from this series, which was just prior to the work I'm showing you that I've done this year. This is a piece that's made of a pair of red, a pair of black, and a pair of blue leather pants. In this case, it was so large, I boiled the leather, and it was amazing. They shrank by easily half. But instead of being sewn into canvas, the leather shapes are mounted on shaped plywood, very thin plywood panels. There are 3 horizontal panels, and they're attached to the wall with cleats, and they stand out from the wall by about an inch and cast a shadow.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so did you cut these plywood, or what gave rise to the idea of using the plywood for your substrate, let's call it?
Well, I guess because I really was thinking of these as objects, wall-mounted objects, and my background is in sculpture, so I
Yeah,
was very comfortable working with wood and
right,
creating the mount for it. And
right.
I wanted the object to engage with the wall or interact with the wall, and wanted to use the negative space of the wall. That entire series was really sort of about that and the shadows that they cast. So
Yeah, it really works so well. I wish we could almost see the relief of it, but it's, it doesn't really matter. I know that it is a relief, so it is standing out a little from the wall.
yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
So these drawings that I've been working on, and I can just sort of show you, these are all sort of laid out. I can hold up a couple of individual ones a little closer. The drawings have to do with my ideas about combining the technique of piecing the leather with other materials such as canvas, or in this case wood veneer, and stretching them around shaped panels as opposed to using the stretcher bars.
Yeah.
So the drawings are a way of just sort of thinking out loud for me about what might be next. Just as I, in the earlier series, sort of combined the tobacco pipes and the leather gloves, these drawings are thoughts about ways to combine, different ways of working. So, and I'll give you another view of the piece that I showed the images of this piece in process. And there it is hanging on the wall.
Claire,
Yes.
do you sell the drawings unto themselves, or are they just strictly for you to create the other?
Oh no, I show them as separate pieces because it's interesting. Sometimes the drawings actually sort of satisfy my need to see a thing, and I
Mhm.
go on and build it. And on the other hand, sometimes they do directly lead to the building of a larger piece, but the piece may not look anything like the study because you know it's like I have a plan, but I also have to improvise because unexpected things happen, accidents happen, you know. So anyway,
Can you tell us a little bit more about your reason for gravitating towards like the pipe and the gloves that you were explaining to Joy and I the other day?
well, I was very interested in the tobacco pipe series. Just came out of things that I was reading. I had read something that Le Corbusier, the architect Le Corbusier, had said about the tobacco pipe as being the epitome of functional form. And I thought that was an interesting, because it's an apparatus for breathing in a way, it's an extension of the body. It functions perfectly in the way that it's designed to do. But I thought about disrupting that or contradicting that. And that's why I started with the tobacco pipes. It directly came out of readings that I was doing. And then again, the series with the kid leather gloves came directly out of thinking of how to, possibly contradict what I'd just been doing with the gloves or how to, counterpose something to that, a class of objects or a set of objects. So there's always some, conceptual underpinnings to the work that I'm doing, um, but I really am a visual thinker and ultimately, make a thing because I just need to see it, you know, need to see what the idea looks like.
Do you write about your work?
I do, but not to. I mean, in my notebook, I
Mhm.
work in my notebook almost daily. So it's not always easy to formulate the words, though, so to put the thing into words. Um, so I'm glad that if what I've said so far makes sense, I'm happy.
Claire, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you speak about pattern? Because it seems to me that pattern has to be very important to you, but yet then you break the pattern. So can you just speak about
Yeah.
the notion of patterns?
Well, I think I do respond. I just respond to these shapes, and I think that the work is mostly is more about form than about surface. I mean, surface is really secondary, which is why I mean they sort of present themselves as paintings in a way, but I don't think of them as paintings. I guess they're collage, except that they're not the shapes aren't pasted. They're really embedded to create one surface. Um, but yeah, I'm interested in I've read a lot about the early origins of clothing and how the very earliest um, clothing, actually, even before humankind discovered how to create looms and weave cloth, the very first clothing was created out of animal hides. And the very first, like genealogical or ancestral patterns that we see repeated in motifs and all kinds of things from rug textiles, clothing textiles, but also rugs and basketry and wood carving and um, uh,
Patterns.
yeah, they were created. These patterns arose out of leather garments that were constructed out of hides, animal hides of
Oh,
all
right.
kinds
Yeah,
of
yeah.
different shapes. That just fascinates me.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of reading about that. I'm really interested in the way and the amount of waste that is in clothing, our form of Western clothing that's tubular in construction. So shapes are cut out of a length of cloth that comes off of a loom. But then there's a lot of waste between the shapes that are cut out, and it's and that's built in. There's a whole movement now in sort of sustainable living in which a group of young clothing designers are going back to try to figure out ways to cut cloth without leaving so much on the cutting
That's great.
board and then in the landfill. But you know, the reason for the early Roman draped garments was, you know, there was not a lot of sewing going on in those. They were draped and tied, and rectangular pieces of cloth that were straight off the loom. All of this so Deborah's question was about shape, and yeah, I'm fascinated with these shapes that we've devised to contour our forms.
Well, also, I think Deborah said something about pattern, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the repeat,
The repeat pattern, yeah.
Because of the inherent symmetry, the bilateral symmetry of the human figure and the clothing pattern. Sometimes, you know, I find that I am really wanting to embrace that and accentuate that, and sometimes I find that I'm trying to sort of defeat that or find a way to, you know, deny that. But yeah, that's the reason for the repeats, is there's always two arms, two legs, two sides of
Oh, yeah. Okay.
the
So it all
back.
comes back to the body. It all comes back to the human body.
Yeah.
Claire?
Unless it's a chair and a chair has 4 legs.
I was just going to ask, can you show us your chair?
It's a separate series. I mean, it's related. Everything's related, but these small chairs are, again, a different type of found object. I have 4 so far. Small children's chairs that I've fitted with. I've cut patterns, you know, to fit, and then have sewn these sort of leather
Covers, right?
Yeah, covers, but they fit very tightly.
Very well, yeah.
So
I wish we could touch them,
Yeah.
even though we're probably not supposed to.
Actually, I'd like to sit on it.
so anyway, that's all that's it for my remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I know we've gone a bit over time, so
It was very interesting.
well, thank you.
Very interesting process. Yes. Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions for Claire?
Oh, I could think of a lot of them, but I don't know. So just one thing from I went to art school, and you too, and all of us, but so, you know, the negative space, the concept of negative space is strong in your work, to me, as I view it.
Yes.
And I just wanted, it's an observation more than a question.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. I do. It's as important. Yeah.
Yeah. It's integrated somehow as part of your thinking, I think.
I think it is.
Claire, I wanted to ask a little bit just about like optical illusion, sort of, which is kind of piggybacking on that negative positive space point, in that in some of the work, especially because you're dealing a lot with high contrast, like black and white, like what are your thoughts on optical illusion and, you know, the effects of, like, are you interested in exploring that further in your work, or is it more coming back to the form and the shape and not as much about that?
Optical illusion, do you mean like a trompe-l'oeil effect?
No, some of the pieces, like some of those glove pieces where it's the black and white, and it's sort of like, which shapes are you focusing on first, the blacks or the whites, and
Oh,
that sort of optical effect. I'm just curious if that's something that you're interested in exploring more, or it's just sort of a byproduct in some of the pieces.
I think it's a byproduct. I don't think it's something that I was deliberately exploring. It was more about how to fit those things together without a lot of waste.
Mm-hmm.
How to try to use every part. And in most cases, I kind of did. So, but that's it. Interesting. I'll look at those a little differently now that you've said that.
That's why these discussions are so great.
Yeah.
I just think we all bring something else to the table, and everybody's kind of like, wow, I didn't think of that, and that's why I love talking about this.
One other question. Where do you find your leather garments? Like, is it something that you try to find things that have been previously owned, or are you purchasing things? Like, how do you find them?
Never buy something new for this project, but so it's all from thrift stores.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a lot of
Yeah.
pre-owned, pre-worn leather garments in thrift stores, but also on eBay. If it's not very expensive, I won't spend a lot of money on it. But if it's something that's offered on eBay for not very much, I keep searches open there. So, and then sometimes people give me things. Often,
Yeah.
So, anyway, thanks everybody so much.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much.
you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I hope everyone enjoyed the tours, and thank you to our artists. Joy, do you want to just make any announcements to close
Yes,
out the program?
I do. I just, first of all, would like to wish everybody a very safe and wonderful holiday season, and hope that 2021 will be a much better year for all of us. Additionally, our last biennial offering will be on Friday, January 8th. We will have artists in the gallery with David Almieta, Nancy Metz, and Claire will be there. We will be sharing the recordings of these virtual studio tours and panel conversations in the coming weeks. The biennial closes on January 10th. So if you have not been there and you want to be there, please make sure to see it before then. And we will have 2 new exhibitions opening on January 16th and the following week on the 23rd. So thank you all so very much. And I'm thrilled that you were all here to join us.